This is a real story shared by a woman named Emily on a popular Reddit thread, and it has haunted me ever since I read it. Emily had just moved into an old but charming apartment on the second floor of a building in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The place was cozy, with high ceilings and big windows that let in a lot of natural light. It was perfect for her, or so she thought. One evening, after a long day at work, Emily came home, kicked off her shoes, and sat down by the window with a cup of tea. As she stared out at the darkening street, she noticed something odd. Across from her apartment, there was another building, and in one of the windows on the second floor, there was a man. He was standing perfectly still, facing the window, just staring into her apartment. She could barely make out his features in the dim light, but there was no mistaking it. Someone was watching her. Emily felt a chill crawl down her spine, but she brushed it off as paranoia. Maybe it was just a coincidence, or maybe it was just her imagination. After all, she had just moved in, and it was the first time she'd had a moment to herself. Maybe she was being overly sensitive. But the next night, as she settled into her couch with the same cup of tea, she saw him again. The man in the window was there. This time, he was closer, right up against the glass, staring at her, his face pressed slightly against the window. Her heart began to race. Emily quickly pulled the blinds down, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that settled over her. She tried to tell herself it was just a coincidence. Maybe he lived in the building across the street, and he just happened to be in his window at the same time she was. The following days brought more of the same. Every evening, the man would appear in the same window, staring at her. Sometimes he would stand there for hours, unmoving, just watching. Other times he'd disappear, only to return the next night. It was becoming unbearable. Emily felt like she was being suffocated by this invisible presence, as if the man's eyes were following her every move. So, she decided to confront it. One evening, as she was sitting near the window, Emily took a deep breath and decided to look across the street directly into the window where the man usually stood. She was determined to catch a glimpse of him in the act, to see if she could figure out who he was. She leaned forward, and there he was. But what made her blood run cold was not his face, but the fact that he wasn't standing in the window anymore. Instead, he was standing behind her. Emily whipped around, but there was no one there. Terrified, she called the building's management and asked if they had any information about the tenant in the apartment across the street. The manager seemed puzzled, but promised to check. The next day, Emily received a call. The manager told her that the apartment across from hers had been empty for over 2 years. No one had lived there for a long time. And yet, every night, the man was still standing in the window, watching her. This story still gives me chills. Sometimes the most terrifying thing is realizing you're not alone, even when you're certain you are.